Churchill's Britain moved against the Marshal who had helped build its air shield. Not after disaster, after survival. Hugh Dowding had helped shape the defense system that met the Luftwaffe over the Channel. Radar warnings, observers, filter rooms, controllers, squadrons, airfields, ground crews, and pilots all tied into one fighting network. Then, only months after that shield held, Dowding was out. That is the uncomfortable part of this story. In May 1940, France was collapsing. Britain was under pressure to send more fighters across the Channel. Every aircraft sent to France looked like loyalty. Every aircraft kept at home could look cold, stubborn, almost ruthless. Dowding saw the danger inside the generosity. If Britain gave away too many fighters, what would be left when the Luftwaffe turned towards Britain itself? Was he being difficult? Was he protecting his command too fiercely? Or was he the man in the room who understood that Britain's last shield could not be spent before the decisive battle had even begun? Then came the strange ending. His warning proved painfully relevant. Britain survived. The pilots became legends. Churchill's words entered history. And Dowding was pushed aside. So why did Britain remove the air commander most closely linked with its survival? Was it Churchill's hostility? Was it RAF politics? Was it the price of being right in a way that made other men uncomfortable? Friends, let's get this channel to 1,000 subscribers. We are very close now. Please subscribe, press the hype button, and stay with this story. Because the Battle of Britain was not only fought in the sky, it was also fought inside the machinery of command. The popular memory begins above the south coast. Spitfires turning into the sun. Hurricanes climbing hard towards incoming raids. Young pilots waiting near dispersal huts, never knowing how many more scrambles the day might demand. That memory deserves its place. Fighter Command's aircrew paid heavily. Hundreds of its airmen were killed during the battle. Many more carried the strain of repeated combat over their own country, often with little rest between one alarm and the next. Yet the aircraft were only the part people could see. Behind each scramble stood a chain of warning and control. Radar stations watched the approaches to Britain. Reports moved inland. The Royal Observer Corps helped track aircraft once they crossed the coast. Filter rooms turned fragments into a usable picture. Controllers decided which squadrons should rise, where they should go, and when they should be held on the ground. A fighter was not useful merely because it existed. It had to reach the right place, at the right height, with enough warning, enough fuel, enough pilots, enough armorers, enough mechanics, and enough discipline not to waste it. That was Dowding's world. He was not the romantic image of 1940. He was not the young pilot smiling beside a Spitfire. He was older, reserved, severe in manner, and often difficult to handle. Britain did not need charm that summer. It needed an air defense that worked. Dowding had become Commander-in-Chief of RAF Fighter Command before the crisis reached its full force. In the years before the battle, Britain's defense against air attack was built into something far more complicated than squadrons waiting on airfields. The point was not one miracle weapon. Radar mattered enormously, but radar alone did not win the battle. A warning on the coast was only the beginning. The information had to be interpreted, compared with other reports, passed to the right headquarters, and turned into decisions quickly enough to matter. A squadron sent up too late might never reach the bombers. A squadron sent up too early might burn fuel and land before the attack arrived. A squadron sent to the wrong sector might leave another airfield exposed. The public saw fighters. Dowding saw timing. That is why the Spitfire legend, powerful as it is, can shrink the story. The Spitfire became the symbol, but hurricanes carried a large share of the fighting. Pilots became the faces of survival, but radar operators, WAAF plotters, observer corps volunteers, telephone operators, controllers, ground crews, armorers, mechanics, and factory workers all belonged to the same defense. Britain's shield was built from masts, maps, telephones, trained eyes, repaired engines, and exhausted hands. Dowding sat at the center of that idea. His task was not to throw every aircraft into the air to look brave. It was to keep Fighter Command alive through the next raid, and the next one, and the one after that. That made him valuable. It also made him infuriating. In May 1940, Germany's attack in the West tore through Allied expectations. France was in danger. British troops were in danger. The pressure to send more help was enormous. For Churchill, newly installed as Prime Minister, the situation was brutal. He had to support an ally, protect British honor, and still think about what might happen if France fell. The war was not only a question of aircraft numbers. It was alliance, morale, diplomacy, and survival tangled together. Dowding's argument cut across the emotion of the moment. He warned that Britain could not keep sending fighter aircraft to France without endangering its own defense. The point was not that France did not matter. The point was that Britain might soon face the Luftwaffe directly, and if Fighter Command had already been drained, there might be no second reserve waiting behind it. It was the kind of warning leaders hate receiving. It did not sound generous. It did not make an easy speech. It did not photograph well. It dealt in arithmetic. Aircraft lost over France could not defend Kent, Sussex, London, or the fighter airfields of southern England. Pilots lost in a collapsing campaign could not be replaced quickly. Fighter Command was a limited force facing a likely emergency. Dowding was saying that Britain had to stop spending its shield before the main blow arrived. That warning helped define his reputation. Some saw clear judgment, others saw stubbornness. The Churchill part of this story needs care. It is tempting to say that Churchill hated Dowding because hatred is neat. It gives the story a villain, a wound, and a clean explanation. History does not give us something so simple. What can be said more safely is that Dowding clashed with powerful pressures around the government and inside the RAF. He gave advice that was necessary but unwelcome. He protected his command at a moment when everyone wanted more from it. Churchill needed men who acted. He also had to deal with men who said no. Dowding was one of them. Then came the battle that made Fighter Command immortal. From the summer of 1940, the Luftwaffe mounted its daylight campaign against Britain. The purpose was to weaken or defeat British air power, especially Fighter Command, before any invasion plan could become realistic. Geography now turned into pressure. The Channel kept danger close, but it also gave Britain a warning interval if the system worked. German aircraft had to cross water, reach their targets, fight through British defenses, and return. RAF fighters did not need to chase every enemy aircraft back to the continent. They needed to stop Britain's air defense from being broken. Dowding's method fitted that problem. He did not have to destroy the Luftwaffe in one grand sweep. He had to keep Fighter Command functioning while making German daylight operations too costly and uncertain to achieve their aim. Disciplined defense rarely looks dramatic from the outside. Inside it, every minute counts. Controllers tried to avoid waste. Squadrons were scrambled where they were needed. Pilots were fed into the battle in ways that gave Britain a chance to keep fighting tomorrow, not merely to strike a dramatic blow today. The strain was immense. Airfields were attacked, pilots were killed, aircraft came back damaged, if they came back at all. Ground crews worked under pressure that rarely receives the same light as the cockpit. A fighter only became a weapon again if somebody repaired it, refueled it, rearmed it, and prepared it for another climb into danger. The Battle of Britain was fought in the air. It was sustained on the ground.
The pilots were not all British either.
Fighter Command's defence was British-led, but it included men from the Commonwealth and from Allied countries. That matters. The defence of Britain was an island story, but not a narrow one. Men from beyond Britain fought in British squadrons at the moment the island needed every trained airman it could find. Churchill's phrase, "the few," captured the emotional truth of the battle. Dowding System helped make sure the few were not spent blindly. That distinction is everything. A brave pilot sent too late is a tragedy. A brave pilot sent blindly is a gamble. A brave pilot sent into the right sector at the right moment becomes part of a defense that can hold. By September, the battle had become a test of endurance. The Luftwaffe shifted pressure. London was bombed. Fighter Command was stretched. British civilians found themselves inside the war in a more direct and frightening way. The sound of engines was no longer distant news from Europe. It was above homes, stations, streets, docks, and factories. Still, the defense held. Not cleanly, not cheaply, not with the certainty that later memory sometimes gives it, but it held. Germany failed to gain the air superiority it needed. Britain remained in the war. The planned invasion was not carried out. Later, the RAF would describe the battle as Nazi Germany's first major military defeat. For Dowding, that should have meant security. Instead, victory opened another argument. Inside the RAF, the dispute over how the battle should be fought had never fully disappeared. The most famous part of it became known through the Big Wing controversy. The idea was appealing. Rather than sending smaller formations quickly into action, larger formations of fighters could be assembled and sent against enemy raids with greater force. It sounded aggressive. It looked decisive. It promised a more visible blow against the Luftwaffe. The problem was time. Large formations took time to gather. In the southeast, where Keith Park's 11 Group carried the heaviest burden of defending London and the approaches across the Channel, time was often exactly what was missing. Park needed rapid response. Dowding supported a defense that preserved flexibility and reacted quickly to raids. Trafford Leigh-Mallory of 12 Group and Douglas Bader became associated with the Big Wing approach. The debate was tactical on the surface, but it soon became institutional and political as well. The clean legend gives the impression of heroic men calmly agreeing around one table. The real institution was under strain. It contained rival views, strong personalities, competing doctrines, and officers who believed their method offered the better answer. The Big Wing was not simple foolishness. It had serious supporters who believed it could bring stronger offensive results. Its appeal is easy to understand, especially when the country wanted visible blows against the enemy. Yet, in the conditions faced by 11 Group, speed could matter more than spectacle. A massive formation arriving late could be less useful than a smaller formation arriving in time. That was the hard center of the dispute. Dowding, already marked by some as difficult, now found himself on the wrong side of powerful RAF politics. His victory had not ended the argument, it had sharpened it. Because if Dowding and Park had been right, then others had been wrong during the most dangerous air battle Britain had faced. Institutions do not always reward the people who make them feel exposed. In November 1940, Dowding was replaced as Commander-in-Chief of Fighter Command by Sholto Douglas. That fact still feels stark. The commander, closely associated with the defense system that helped Britain survive, was removed shortly after the battle. There were reasons that can be listed without turning the story into melodrama. Dowding was older. His manner could be difficult. RAF politics were fierce. Tactical disputes had hardened. The war was changing. Powerful figures wanted a different direction. Churchill did not need to be Dowding's private enemy for the outcome to be severe. He only had to accept the process that moved Dowding aside. And that may be the colder truth. A commander can be right and still become inconvenient. A system can depend on a man and still discard him. A nation can survive because of someone's judgment and still fail to honor him properly when the danger passes. Churchill belongs in that complexity. His speeches gave Britain language when language mattered. His leadership helped turn resistance into national will. No serious account of 1940 can pretend that was irrelevant. Yet Churchill was not the whole shield. The shield had many builders, and Dowding was central among them. The popular version often narrows the Battle of Britain to icons: Churchill, the Spitfire, and the young pilot. The fuller version is stronger. It includes the radar mast on the coast, the observer watching the sky, the plotter moving markers across a table, the controller making a decision under pressure, the mechanic working on an aircraft that may be needed again within hours, the hurricane pilot climbing into danger, the overseas airman fighting in a British squadron far from home, the commander trying to spend machines and lives carefully because there are not enough of either. That version does not weaken the legend. It makes the legend worthy of the cost. Dowding's difficulty was that his greatest strength was not easily celebrated. He was not selling a glorious attack. He was defending warning time, fighter strength, pilot reserves, and Britain's narrow margin of survival. He said no when yes would have looked nobler. He held back when throwing everything forward might have looked braver. He trusted a defense network when others wanted more visible aggression. When Britain survived, the country remembered the part of the story that could be painted on a poster. It took longer to reckon with the man who had helped make the poster possible. Was Dowding treated unfairly? Many later accounts have judged the timing of his removal harshly, and it is not hard to see why. Victory had barely settled into memory before the architect of Fighter Command's defense was moved away from the command he had shaped. Still, fairness in wartime is rarely clean. Commanders are replaced, institutions change course, personalities clash, senior leaders make decisions for reasons that are strategic, political, and human all at once. Dowding was not flawless. No commander is. The better question is whether Britain properly valued the kind of leadership he represented. Quiet, difficult, unspectacular, precise. The kind of leadership that does not always create the best photograph, but may decide whether a country is still standing by morning. In 1940, Britain needed courage in the cockpit. It also needed discipline in command. Dowding gave Britain that discipline. He understood that air defense was not heroic improvisation alone. It was warning, control, timing, preservation, repair, and restraint. He knew that fighters had to be protected before they could protect anyone else. That insight helped Britain survive one of the most dangerous moments in its modern history. Churchill's words gave the battle thunder. Dowding System gave the thunder something to stand behind. And when the battle was over, the Marshal, who had helped guard Britain's sky, found himself pushed away from the command he had shaped. That is why his story still bites. Britain faced danger from across the Channel. It also faced the old danger inside every great institution, forgetting the difficult person once his difficulty has saved you. Dowding was not the only man who saved Britain. No single man was. The aircraft mattered, the pilots mattered,
Churchill mattered.
Park mattered. The ground crews, radar operators, observers, plotters, factories, and overseas aircrew mattered. Dowding mattered because he helped connect them. The Air Ministry could replace the commander. It could not erase the shield he had built. If Dowding's story deserves a place beside the pilots he protected, subscribe, press the hype button, and share this with someone who knows the Battle of Britain only through the Spitfire myth. And tell us in the comments, was Hugh Dowding treated unfairly, or was the RAF right to move on after victory?